What we're looking at in this photograph is a still from a film that was made by Soviet cameramen shortly after the liberation of Auschwitz on January 27th, 1945. Now, what it shows is children, many of whom had been victims of Nazi medical experiments, being marched out of the camp. And you see that they're wearing these small concentration camp uniforms. Many of them have been tattooed on their arms, you know, when they entered the camp. And it really, to me, conveys the horrific policies of Nazi Germany. So that even these little kids were victims of Nazi brutality. That we sometimes think that, well, you know, things happen in wartime, you have brutalities. But when you see the faces and the bodies of these kids that were subjected to hideous medical experiments, whose parents were often murdered, whose siblings were often murdered in that same camp, and many of these kids were left orphans, it brings up the hideous nature of the Nazi regime. And what you have to realize is that by and large, children in Auschwitz and in other places didn't survive. That is, you know, in the killing centers and in the ghettos, it was often children and the elderly who died first. If you think about Auschwitz, for instance, when you had deportations of families, of groups from all over Europe that were sent to Auschwitz, they carried out a selection process. As soon as they disembarked from the trains. And often physicians and SS officers were determined who was going to live or die. So they would select those that were capable of forced labor, even for a short amount of time, and then the rest were sent to the gas chambers. Elderly people, in general, and young children, pregnant women, were as a rule sent to the gas chambers immediately. So they were not registered or tattooed. What makes these kids, you know, different in that respect is that often SS physicians, and I almost hate to use the word physicians to describe what they did, but these SS doctors were often looking for particular types of people to carry out their experiments on. So that, for instance, Dr. Josef Mengele, who was probably the best known of these doctors at Auschwitz, he was interested in twins. And so he would select children that were twins in order to carry out his medical experiments. And there were other doctors that were interested in other types of things. So some of these children survived because they were going to be guinea pigs in these experiments. And so looking at this footage and looking at this photograph, looking at the footage that was taken by the Soviets after the liberation of the camp, really is a powerful reminder of where racism, where anti-Semitism, and where hate can lead us. And that even the smallest of human beings, children, can be victims.